Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining macadmin's India monthly huddle, December 2024. And thank you, Elliot, for joining on late evening your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It's just a brief introduction about macadmin's India. We started in 2009 with a small group, and then we slowly, expanded. And after COVID, we had a good number of increase with the macadmins in India. So we expanded our platform, and we are in LinkedIn, Slack, also YouTube, and Jamf Nation user group. Also, we have a Telegram group here for our internal discussions, and also we are in macadmin Slack. So we use whichever is relevant to each people. So our mission is to build a vibrant community of Apple IT professionals across India who can learn from each other and solve problems together. Yep. And we have our website, macadmins.india, macadmins.in. So, whoever want to join us to be part of the group, yeah, they can visit there and join us. This is going to be our agenda. So we have Elliot who will do us a demo on Escrow Buddy, and might be Elliot after that. If you feel you want to take your time back, yeah, you can finish your Escrow Buddy and take your time back, and then we'll continue with two slides of managing Apple Intelligence in macOS 15.2. So I'm sure like many of the Apple admins on last 2 days are figuring this out a lot, and then we have some update on Mac admins India platform. Yep, welcome Elliot. And it's hey guys, so this is a quick introduction about him. So he works as a senior client system engineer at Netflix, and he is a creator of the tool which is going to demo now, which is Escrow Buddy, and another tool DocLib. And he is also a co-creator of Auto Packager, which is a GUI version of Auto Package, and a recipe robot, which will help you to create a recipe for Auto Package. And he's also a core maintainer of Auto Package. So if most of us know what does Auto Package means. It's an automation framework for macOS packaging and also distributing with all the MDM softwares. So if you really guys have not used it, I would always ask you to ask everyone to explore Auto Package, because it solves most of our packaging work. And also, like, if you have 400, 500 apps to maintain, and this takes care of taking care of packaging it with every whenever and every update is released. And also he is a contributor for Monkey and Profile Manifest, and also multiple free. He you can check his website. I forget to mention that here it's elliotjordan.com, and he has mentioned about his all his speaking at global Mac admin conferences, and you can find him on his GitHub by the name Home by Six. And thank you, Elaine, for joining us, and welcome. And you can take over. Thank you.
Thank you for the very thorough introduction. I appreciate that. All right, let me see if I'm going to share my screen here. Yes, this one. Okay, should be seeing a slide now.
Yeah.
Good. All right, welcome. So I'm very excited to talk about Escrow Buddy today. Escrow Buddy is a tool that MDM administrators can use to ensure all their Macs have valid FileVault recovery keys. And just a note here before I start, the links that I mentioned, as well as these slides and everything that I'm going to talk about is all available from the URL at the top of the screen. So you can go to that URL or scan the QR code there. I'll show this URL again at the end, so don't feel like you have to write anything down or rush. So first, who am I? Karthik gave me a great introduction, but I'll just mention that I also was an IT consultant for 10 years before I became a client platform engineer. So that gave me a kind of a sense for what it's like to troubleshoot problems one at a time. And that's one of the big reasons that now I'm a client platform engineer for companies with large Mac fleets, because I found that I really enjoyed fixing those problems, hundreds or thousands of computers at a time instead of just desk by desk. So yeah, that's how I ended up where I am. So before I go into Escrow Buddy, just establishing some basics about FileVault. You probably already know this, but just a quick review. FileVault is Apple's way of encrypting your computer's whole disk so that only authorized people can access its data. And organizations that use FileVault make sure that the data remains protected even if a Mac is lost or stolen. And users' passwords can unlock the FileVault, the users on the Mac itself, as well as a personal recovery key can be generated as a backup option if an authorized user forgot their password. Institutional recovery keys used to be a thing, but that's not really a thing anymore. Apple doesn't recommend it. So personal recovery key is the way to go. And personal recovery keys, or PRKs, can be stored or escrowed in mobile device management for the MDM, or for the organization that owns the computer. So Escrow Buddy is built to kind of bridge that gap there and help organizations who don't already have their PRKs escrowed in MDM generate new PRKs, which then get escrowed to their MDM. So when people forget their password and they call the help desk can just look up their personal recovery key in whatever the MDM is and then get them back into that Mac. So that's really the point of all of this. So let me set the stage here. I'm going to show you a 30-second demo of Escrow Buddy in action. That really is how long it takes. It's not a complex thing. But let me set up what's going on the screen here. So on the right side, we've got a Mac that was encrypted prior to enrollment in our MDM. So we don't have a recovery key escrowed for this Mac. We've already used MDM to install and configure Escrow Buddy on this Mac, so it should be ready to generate a new key upon the next login. At the top, we are streaming the local Escrow Buddy logs for this Mac over SSH, which we're going to see shortly. And on the bottom, I've set up a looping API query to show what our MDM knows about the recovery key status. This MDM is Jamf, but you could do this with any MDM that has an API. So this information confirms we don't have a key escrowed yet. So with all that said, let's see this in action. So to kick it off, we'll log out. Once our FileVault authorized user logs in again the next time, whether that's a restart or just log out, log in, doesn't matter, that triggers a new FileVault key to be generated, as you can see in the logs at the left. And upon the next recon or machine inventory update, that key is escrowed to our MDM. We'll give it a few seconds here for the recon to finish. There it is. So the Mac sends the encrypted key to our MDM when it responds to the security info MDM command, which for Jamf occurs during and after recon. And now we've got a valid recovery key according to the Jamf API. That's it. That's Escrow Buddy working. So now that you've kind of seen it in action, I'm going to back up and share some context for why this is needed in the first place. So why would FileVault recovery keys be missing in the first place? Well, that can happen for multiple reasons. It could be you're migrating from a different MDM and the keys were stored in the old MDM and they didn't automatically get migrated to the new. The computer could have been encrypted prior to enrollment in MDM, in which case the escrow process only happens when that key is first generated. If the computer was enrolled in a different MDM, or if it wasn't enrolled in any MDM, then the key wouldn't arrive in your new MDM that way. So encrypted prior to enrollment is a common thing that we see. It could be that the escrow profile was missing or misconfigured at the time of encryption, or it could be some kind of data loss or corruption in your MDM, some kind of database problem or something like that. And regardless of how they're missing, there are a couple ways you can solve missing FileVault recovery keys and get them back. One, maybe the simplest low-tech way to do it is to turn FileVault off and then on again. That will generate and escrow a new key, but of course, that's a little bit risky because for a period the Mac would be unencrypted. With new Apple Silicon, that's probably less risky, but it's still it's a lot of work to try to automate that at a large scale. So I don't recommend it. The next option is to manually run the FDE setup command, specifically FDE setup change recovery -personal. If you run that in terminal, any authorized FileVault administrator can rotate the FileVault recovery key at any time without having to turn FileVault off or on or anything like that. However, most people probably aren't going to be super comfortable opening up terminal and just typing in commands just because their IT person says to. So this is ideally something you don't want to even involve the people in. You just want to do it for them behind the scenes, and then they don't have to worry about it. So the next way to do it is to automate FDE setup. So if FDE setup can actually take a plist with credentials for input, which does allow us to automate its use. And this is the more scalable path to follow. But how specifically should we automate FDE setup? We're either going to need one of two things to do that. One is the existing valid personal recovery key. And if, a couple slides ago, we noticed that the key is missing. So we don't have a valid personal recovery key. Maybe it's in the old MDM. Maybe the user wrote it down on a Post-it note. It's somewhere else. We don't have it. The other thing that we need to automate FDE setup is a FileVault authorized user's password. So in the scenario I outlined, we don't have the valid PRK, so it must be the user password that we have to use. So the old way that we did this, back in maybe 2015 or so, was to set the context. I'm going to pause here for a second. Somebody reported they can't see the screen.
Your screen is visible, no problem, actually.
Oh, okay, excellent, cool. So the old way to do this was to make the user aware that something needs their remediation, and then prompt them for their password, which they would enter into a dialog like this. Trigger FD setup behind the scenes using that password as input, and then communicate the result to the user to let them know it either worked or didn't work. So that's a lot of steps, and doing this well requires a lot of work. A lot of emails ahead of time to let people know that this is coming, preparing your help desk staff to answer questions about it, preparing your phishing email address if you've got one to be able to tell people, yes, this is legit. But even worse, this method requires users to be more accepting of credential prompts in general. This particular prompt, if I can go back a couple right here, this is just being generated via AppleScript. There's other more nuanced ways to do that, but it kind of looks like malware, to be honest. So by asking users to interact with prompts like that, you're not building a healthy security culture. You're kind of conditioning people to be more permissive with giving out their credentials, which is not a good idea. So I have a confession. That's me in the photo here in 2015, advertising exactly what I just told you not to do. So I'm partially responsible for how many people use that old method, and I just didn't, I had good intentions, but I just didn't know there was a better way, and there wasn't really until about 2017. And now that I know, I'm shouting from the rooftops to convert everybody to the new way. So what is this new great way? The new way is an authorization plugin. So these plugins are used by the macOS login window to make decisions and provide automation around the login process. A huge benefit of authorization plugins is that they can securely access the credentials being used to log in and piggyback on that process to use those credentials elsewhere. So one common example of this includes federation to an IDP, such as what Jamf Connect enables. You log in to a single login window, and that checks with your IDP, authenticates you, and then lets you into your Mac with that same password. So that's an example of an authorization plugin's benefit. An auth plugin is ideal for automating FD setup because it can leverage the trusted macOS login interface to do it, which obviates the need for any additional password prompts. There's no time-consuming communication or emails, no support tickets from suspicious users, and no maintenance of fragile shell scripts needed if you go this method. So I've created a diagram of the systems and components that Escrow Buddy uses to enact its authorization plugin. It all centers around the trusted, unaltered macOS login window experience. It's exactly the same login window that people are already used to. The macOS security server, the authorization policy database, and the FD setup binary in blue here are all built into macOS. There's no third-party components needed for that level. Escrow Buddy itself includes the items in green, which comprise the authorization plugin and a script that adds the plugin's mechanism to the macOS authorization database using the security command. So when you deploy Escrow Buddy, you'll include the items in orange as well. That includes a configuration profile enabling FileVault recovery key escrow. So you've probably already got this if you turned on FileVault via your MDM. The escrow payload is probably already included in that, but something you might want to check. And then the other plist, the one on the left there, is a plist created with the defaults command, not deployed via MDM, that tells Escrow Buddy that key regeneration is needed at next login on this Mac. So the green is Escrow Buddy and the orange is deployment of Escrow Buddy in the package. So the beauty of this arrangement is that Escrow Buddy doesn't actually handle creating or communicating the key itself. Instead, it just relies on Apple's built-in first-party tools and capabilities. And as a result, the FileVault personal recovery key on the right there is sent up directly from Apple's first-party tools to your MDM. And Escrow Buddy does not really it doesn't see the key, it doesn't store the key, it has no way of accessing the key. It just generated it and it's out. So very simple. So if this is such a great idea, how come it hadn't already been done? Well, as it turns out, it was. It was introduced as a feature of Crypt around 2017. Crypt, in case you're not familiar, is an authorization plugin that is most often paired with a Crypt server in order to escrow FileVault PRKs and other secrets to a Crypt server. The Crypt agent can be deployed standalone with no server and generate new keys upon login. However, most people don't use it that way. It's primarily targeted at administrators who are running a Crypt client and Crypt server together. And the included payload and documentation and codebase is all written by and for those who don't escrow FileVault to MDM. So I and my team at Netflix realized there was a potential gap to be filled in the ecosystem for an authorization plugin that generates new FileVault keys specifically for escrow to MDM, and no more than that, just that. So we built a new one and called it Escrow Buddy, and really it's a stripped down alternative to the Crypt agent that's laser focused on generating new personal recovery keys just for escrow to MDM. So Escrow Buddy checks for the presence of that MDM profile in orange that I showed you that configures escrow. And then it generates new FileVault keys upon login once it's configured, and at no other time, just login. And that includes startup or log out and then log back in. However you're logging in, it should generate a FileVault key. And that's it. That's all it does. There's no server component. There's no other moving parts. And that has been very successful. It was released in June, I want to say June 2023. And it's still today on version 1.0. It has not needed any bug fixes or feature adds or anything like that. So the simple idea, I think, has worked really well. So here's how well it worked for us. When we started this project, about half of our Mac fleet had an invalid or missing recovery key, mostly because they were encrypted prior to enrollment in Jamf. And we started testing Escrow Buddy in March, April 2023, and then deployed broadly to Netflix Macs in May 2023. And Escrow Buddy helped us go from about 50% to about 95% key validity in the time shown here. I think within 5 months or 6 months, we were at 92%, and it only went up from there. Today, or I guess May, we reached 98.4. I'm not sure, that's probably even gone up since May, but I stopped keeping track because I was happy with 98.4. So you can see this is without any user comms, without users having to enter their password more than just at the login window, without phishing suspicion, none of that. We got from 50% to 98% just by letting people log in the way they normally do. So how can you achieve similar results if you're interested at your organization? Maybe you're already starting at 90% and you just need an extra boost to get to 100. Or maybe you have literally 0 keys and you need to regenerate all of them because you're switching MDMs. Starting to use Escrow Buddy is pretty simple if you have an MDM. As long as the MDM supports installing package installer files, and as long as there are instructions you can follow. And there are already instructions for many of these MDMs in the Escrow Buddy wiki. If you run an MDM at your company that's not listed here and you're interested in Escrow Buddy, don't let that discourage you. The steps are probably very similar to one of these others. And in fact, I would love it if you've got some new MDM for you to write the documentation for the Escrow Buddy wiki and submit it so that others who use that MDM can benefit. That's already happened for, I think, Hexnode isn't listed here, but somebody submitted a Hexnode page. And a few of these as well, like Adagi and Kanji, were also contributed by users because I don't use those myself. So yeah, I encourage you to get involved, even if your MDM is not listed. So I'll give you a basic example here using Jamf as an example, because that's what I'm using myself. There is a wiki page for Jamf that's linked down there, as well as an HCS guide in PDF format. Either of those are great documentation to follow. But basically, it's this step. It's downloading the latest Escrow Buddy release from GitHub and then upload that to Jamf for distribution. Creating a smart group that collects all the Macs that have missing or invalid FileVault recovery key status. And then creating a policy that installs Escrow Buddy on those Macs and runs that defaults command that lets Escrow Buddy know that a new key is needed at the next login. And the defaults command is included in that documentation, so you can just copy and paste it into Jamf. And that's it. So for those Macs that are in scope, the keys would be generated at the next login, and then a subsequent recon would send that key to Jamf and eventually validate it, and it would show up as valid. And then the Macs fall back out of that smart group scope. So that's how we had it configured in the beginning. There are some advanced workflow options if you want to go beyond the basics. Some organizations may benefit from, for example, separate policies for installation versus configuration. I prefer this because it reduces the setup time on Macs. If they already have Escrow Buddy installed, we don't have to install it again. We just configure it, and then it runs again at the next login. Also, recidivism detection. It's a fancy Scrabble word. That means Macs that go from valid key to invalid or missing key more than once. So if it's looping through this process, you can flag those Macs so you can investigate the root cause. And again, all these are on the wiki page for Escrow Buddy on Jamf. I gave some examples on how to do this. Automatic key rotation. You can, at a date and time or at a specific age, you can rotate the key automatically, even if it is valid, just because you feel like you want to do that, or because your department policy requires it, or something like that. I don't recommend doing that unless you have to, but some people have given me some valid reasons why that might be needed. And logout notification. This is probably going to be a popular one when you want to use Jamf Helper or AppleScript or something like that to notify the users that they need to log out in order to start this process. I recommend not doing that if you can keep it simple. Just let the user log in at the next cadence that they would have normally done that if they install macOS updates, or if they log out or restart for any other reason. Escrow Buddy will take advantage of that, and at the next login it will do what it needs to. But if you really want to, you can display notification for people using some other third-party tools that tie in with the Escrow Buddy status. And yeah, again, that's all on the wiki. So I'll also cover one specific workflow here. You probably noticed in my demo at the beginning that the key was escrowed only a few seconds after login. And that's not a coincidence. Usually the process that kicks off Jamf login or Jamf recon runs only once every 24 hours at my organization. And you can change it to make it more frequent if you want, but Jamf doesn't really recommend more often than once per day. So how do you get the recovery key as quickly as possible after it's been generated? So I implemented a launch daemon that looks like this. And basically it's watching for a particular path, the FileVault prk.dat file to be created. And that is a first-party Apple file that gets generated when FileVault keys are generated. And that's the kind of the container file that's eventually going to get uploaded via the security info response that MDM will send. But when it sees that path change, it calls up the program arguments up above, Jamf recon. So that triggers that recon to happen immediately when that file changes. And that's how that happened so quickly in my demo. So if you want to do the same for your organization, you can feel free to copy and paste that daemon. But again, if you don't need to. If you want to keep it simple, recon does happen normally every day or so, however you've configured it. So you don't necessarily need to do this if you don't want to. But this code will be in the resources at the end and the link below as well. So some miscellaneous tips and troubleshooting techniques that might be helpful as you're deploying Escrow Buddy include reading the logs. You would use the log show or log stream commands to do this. There's some information on the wiki about the specifics, but that is the way to read the local logs. If Escrow Buddy is not working the way you expect it to, that's the first step. And also making sure to test Escrow Buddy with new macOS versions. 15.2 just came out a couple of days ago. I made sure to install 15.2 on a test device and run through my Escrow Buddy workflow to make sure that everything was still working. It was, thank goodness. So if you have Appleseed for IT, you can also do this on the betas. And if there's a new beta coming up that you're planning on deploying, you may want to just kick the tires with Escrow Buddy and make sure that everything is working properly. And if it's not, definitely report that on the Escrow Buddy GitHub as an issue, because I'm sure that other administrators would like to know too. Tracking success over time. So the graph that I showed earlier was generated via advanced searches that I saved in Jamf. And then I used an API query to basically get the count of each search member. So all of the computers that were in each of those searches aligned with the count of the bar graphs over time. And that's how I track that without having to manually write down the numbers every day. As well as managing the authorization database entries. Some macOS versions will reset the authorization database, including Escrow Buddy. So you can see my blog post for details on fixing this, but it's just something you have to build into your Jamf Smart Group or EA, if you're deploying with Monkey, you have to make sure that your install check script detects that condition. So yeah, that's all in the wiki. If you have already deployed Escrow Buddy, excellent, thank you. And if you're considering doing it soon, I would encourage you to submit the Escrow Buddy usage survey. This is just a quick few questions survey on Google Forms, totally anonymous. You don't have to share anything that you don't want to. But this helps my team gauge how many people are using Escrow Buddy in the field and how much we should prioritize ongoing work and communication and bug fixes and things like that. So it should only take 2 or 3 minutes. I would definitely encourage you to fill that out. And another note, I was very proud to kind of convince Netflix and the MacAdmins open source organization to work together to host the source code for Escrow Buddy on the MacAdmins open source GitHub organization, which was really great because that puts Escrow Buddy alongside other very important tools like Nudge and Sofa and the MacAdmins Python package. We've also automatically signed and notarized new releases of Escrow Buddy using the MacAdmins open source signing certificate using GitHub Actions, which is really a lot less work for me and my team. So it makes it easier to administer, and if people want to submit pull requests, they can. Potentially long after I'm no longer using or maintaining Escrow Buddy, presumably somebody would be able to take it over because of its membership in this organization. So I'm really happy that I was able to do that. Pictured there is a session from PSU Mac Admins 2023 where some colleagues and I talked about the Mac Admins open source organization. So if you're interested, definitely check out that session on YouTube. It's a good organization to be involved with. So takeaways, as we're nearing the end here, I would encourage you to check if you're currently administering FileVault on your Mac fleet, check how many Macs in your fleet have missing or invalid keys, and see whether Escrow Buddy is a solution that you can use to remediate. If you're using existing solutions that prompt for a password, I would strongly encourage you to stop that and to switch to Escrow Buddy. Try it out on a test device and see if it gets you what you need without asking for a password, because that's just good security culture, and it's going to be good for your users, good for you, simpler to administer, good for everybody involved. So yeah, that is it. I'm happy to take questions. I'll stick around and hear about the other topics as well. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Elliot. And I think nice demo. We'll leave this, forum open for questions to you. But actually, when I saw your Mac admins AD last year, so I thought, as soon as I saw the video, I thought I'll invite you one day for this demo, because I'm sure anybody who's an Apple device management guys who deal with Apple, they need this tool. That's what I feel, because I'm sure always we have a FileVault, and even we encountered an issue where we didn't know that the FileVault recovery key was missing, and the user forget the password, and he was high profile user in the organization, and he didn't have a backup, and finally nothing we can do about it. It's only about losing the data. So that's when it's a few years back. So that's when I thought we need to find, and we used to use that as the whole mechanism of the reissue. There was a script from, I think you and Jam did it about the recovery key, but that again we need to tell them how to authenticate, send the instructions to them. But Escrow Buddy has solved, and it's really a great tool to be implemented by everybody in the organization. That's what I would recommend, irrespective of any MDM solutions they have.
Yeah. It's really painful to say no to somebody, especially if they're somebody important or with important data, because you don't have their key. So yeah, this is a lifesaver, maybe a job saver.
Yeah. So, yeah, guys, any questions? We'll leave the forum open for questions.
I see Rakshi's question about if a user logs in 10 times a day, does it escrow a new key every login until you remove? No. That is why the defaults command, defaults, the key that it's writing is called generate new key, and you set that to true. That tells Escrow Buddy, please generate a new key at next login. Once Escrow Buddy has done that, it sets that key back to false, so that it doesn't continue generating new keys every single login. And that's why you can't deploy that key via MDM. It has to be locally modifiable so that Escrow Buddy can flip the value back to false. And then after that point, you can remove Escrow Buddy if you want. We've started doing that. We have a monkey conditional item in our manifest that deploys Escrow Buddy if it's needed based on the status of that generate new key being true, and then removes Escrow Buddy when it's not needed based on the generate new key being false. So you can get very granular and just deploy Escrow Buddy to the handful of computers that need it and remove it on everybody else if you want. But if you leave it installed, there's no concern. Logging in 10 times a day, 100 times a day, it's just the first login that counts.
Thank you, Elliot.
Using Escrow Buddy, is it possible to enable the bootstrap token? No, that's a good question though, because Bootstrap tokens are not that different than FileVault recovery keys. So somebody asked if Escrow Buddy could be used to generate Bootstrap tokens if they're missing. And we don't have any plans to do that. But hint, hint, if somebody wanted to create another tool very similar to Escrow Buddy that was just for Bootstrap tokens, I'm sure that would be a very popular tool. It's just not something that we need or plan to work on, but I think that would be a great project. If you want to go talk at a bunch of conferences, think about it.
Okay, John, I have one question. Am I audible? Okay.
Yes.
So we have a scenario where whenever user forgets their password, and then we share the recovery key to the user, and we need to rotate the recovery key. So how the Escrow Buddy can be useful in this case?
Yeah, short answer, it can't. The longer answer is you can keep track of, once you've used the key, you can mark it in Jamf or in your MDM somehow such that the generate new key value is set back to true again. And then at next login, it will generate a new key. But that's not really what Escrow Buddy is for. It's just, it's for missing keys, not old stale keys. I would encourage you to look at Crypt, because that is really one of those advanced features that Crypt is excellent at. It has, the Crypt server specifically has a web interface where technicians can log in and request access to recovery keys. And then you as the administrator can grant them that access. And then once that recovery key has been used, it can automatically be rotated after that use. And this can all be backed with SSO and hosted in your own internal infrastructure. It's much more, capable of what you're looking for than Escrow Buddy. But you could probably fake it with Escrow Buddy with a little bit of scripting.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll stick around if there's any more questions, or otherwise I'll just listen in.
So I have a question for everyone. How many of you have already tried Escrow Buddy? I know some of you already did, so just want to know that. So we probably give it back to you as well, that okay, we are already using it or trying it out or tried it out, and give a big thanks to you for that.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and if you have, definitely consider filling out that survey. That really helps us. But yeah, it's great. I'm happy to see so many people. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, hi, Elliot. I have a question. In case if the FileVault login password and the user login password is different, in that case, will this Escrow Buddy will work, or how it flags that case?
As long as, yeah, I don't think it'll work. I think because it's using that password that was provided at login, if it's different than the password that was provided at FileVault, if they've gotten out of sync, then I don't think that password will be valid for FD setup. But I don't know that for sure, because to be honest, I haven't encountered that problem for a long time. I think it was on Intel Macs with Big Sur and earlier that I was seeing that. I haven't seen that happen on Apple Silicon with newer operating systems. But yeah, if you test it out, let me know. I don't think I wouldn't expect it to.
Yeah, with the local accounts, mostly we are not seeing this, but we had this case in our environment when we are using the ED accounts, as the mobile accounts, I mean to say.
Yeah, if their network password isn't enough to authorize them for FileVault, yeah, then I don't think it'll work.
Mm-hmm.
But in that case, you might have a known local admin account that is authorized for FileVault, in which case you don't even need their password. You can just use your own password with FD setup directly.
Yeah, that's true, because but the problem is the local accounts also are having rotational passwords.
Oh,
So
yeah.
That's a big problem. And I think Sham asked one more similar question, but you answered that. So we don't have any inbuilt mechanism in Escrow Buddy in case if the file vault has been viewed by someone in the Jamf Pro or in any admin Indian server. Do you have any workflow for that to trigger automatically? I mean, to
Yeah,
rotate the key?
not automatically. It would be a manual
Mhm.
process. Once you've viewed it, then you just mark that computer for, back in scope again. Really, I think at that point, I would suggest looking at crypt because crypt does do that automatically.
Okay. Sorry, what is that? Can you please repeat?
I It's correct.
Crypt,
I pinned the link. Yeah, I pinned
yeah.
that in the chat. I mean, I pinned the. So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I was an assumption that once we see the MDM key in Jamf, I think it rotates. Does it not happen automatically once the password is
No,
reset? Okay,
no.
okay. It was the assumption that because I know it rotates the recovery key in Apple Silicon. I think so. The recovery key
No,
password,
I
but
think that
I mean not the
that is the not the recovery key. That is the management. I mean, the local admin account password. If you view that,
labs.
that will rotate. Yeah, that will rotate automatically, but not the recovery key.
Yeah.
The recovery lock password. I think something gets rotated. I'm just check. Okay, yeah, I'll check on it. Thank you.
Yeah, recovery log password rotates.
Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, so Elliot, I can think of a question from 2 years or 2.5 years back. We had a scenario where customers IT misconfigured the entire login setup for the users, and the users were always standard user. The secure token was not generated for those users. If any of the Mac admin get into similar situation where secure token is not kind of enabled for the device itself or the user itself, how Escrow Buddy can help them get the file vault, or what would be the right workflow? Whether we should add the administrator first through MDM and then take control of that. So what would be your recommended method?
Yeah, I think for secure token, Escrow Buddy isn't really going to help you. It's really just the file vault recovery key. So whether you have a secure token or not, if you're a file vault authorized user, you should be able to regenerate that key for the computer and then send it to MDM. But if you're still missing that secure token and as a result, or if you're not a volume owner, and as a result, you can't do things like erase all content and settings and other things like that. Escrow Buddy's not really involved at that point. I think you have to rebuild that secure token yourself. And I have seen that happen back in the day. Accounts that were created programmatically would not have a secure token, but accounts that were created via the setup assistant would. I think that's been fixed, and now it's the first account you create, even if it's programmatic, does have a secure token. And we're still encountering problems with secure tokens. Like technically, some of our automation stations do have secure tokens, but they still can't run erase all content and settings because they're not also volume owners. So I don't really have a solution for that yet. I've got a couple Apple Care tickets asking about it, but I haven't really been able to find a permanent solution. So here's hoping to macOS 16 that would solve that.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. So like that was a nightmare for all of us because we didn't have a way if the device is lost or probably the user forget the password, we don't have a way to get into the device at all. So yeah, that is a bad situation to be in when programmatically created users without secure token. Yeah, it's something that we should figure out, or I would recommend everyone if they're using Jamf or maybe any solution which can do smart grouping, they should start kind of identifying devices without secure token is what I would also recommend. So they don't go through the problem that I went through 2.5 years back with that particular customer.
Yeah, and I think products like Jamf Connect that connect with an IDP source bypass that issue because they're creating the account the proper way so that they do get a secure token. So try to use those methods if possible.
I have a one question, Elliot. So, is there any way to know that the PR key for any of the machines, any command or using the API?
The actual PRK itself?
Right.
Yes, there is an API command. Jamf only added this, I think, a couple years ago, but there is in the Jamf Pro API, there is a endpoint that will give you the actual recovery key. In other MDMs, probably also, but I don't know specifically.
There's a Jamf API, I think, not even a couple of years, I think a few months back, Jamf released
Really?
it, and previously we used to use a Python script to do some, get the data out.
Yeah, it used to be inaccessible. Like it was in the database. So if you had access to the database, you could pull it, but that's really janky. I'll see if I can find it. I'll link it in the chat here. Yep,
Any
here
other
it is.
questions, guys? You. Yep. Okay. No more questions, then I think we'll go to